If you keep poultry or other livestock, one of the greatest fears is a predator attack. One of the best ways of preventing such an attack is an electric fence. And in today's video, we're going to demystify the subject of electric fences. We're going to explain how they work, what the major components are, and how they're put together. Hello, welcome to English Country Life. My name's Hugh and welcome to our chicken enclosure. Welcome to the first in a new series on electric fences. When we started out, I found the whole subject of electric fences a bit confusing, and people would give me all sorts of conflicting advice and talk about one thing or another thing. What I wanted was a simple, straightforward guide to what are all these electrical terms, what do they mean in layman's English, what are the components of an electric fence, how do they go together, how do they work? All of that we're going to cover in today's video, and by the end of this video I promise you'll understand the whole setup, what it needs and how it works. In future videos we'll discuss some options that you may want to consider when you're specifying your own system, but for today let's just get the basics done. Here's the first of the problems we face recorded on trail cam. We like badgers, don't wish them any harm, but they will take a chicken if you let them get close. So the fence protects them. In the second piece, recorded on a security camera, if you look on the bottom right, you'll see a vixen set off the security lights and come through the archway on the right hand side, moving up towards the chicken pen. Again, obviously a problem if they get in amongst the chickens. Interestingly though, the biggest problem that we have faced getting tangled up in the electric fence is loose dogs in the area, and we've had that problem twice and the fence has protected the flock. This section is a bluffer's guide to electrical terms. I promise it's non-technical, I promise it's short. All we need to do is understand 5 terms at a very basic, very straightforward level, just to be able to talk about electric fences sensibly. First of those 5 terms is current. It is the thing that moves around your electric fence, and I'm going to use a visual aid for this stuff, which is the bottle I keep in my workshop, normally full of washing up liquid to wash out brushes, etc. So in that example, current is the water. Current measured in amps. So current, the thing that flows, measured in amps. That's all we need to know. Second term in electrical terms is force. So it's the amount of force pushing the current around the system. So a little bit of force, big bit of force. Electrical force is measured in volts, and that again is really all we need to know about it. Electrical power is the multiplying of the amount of current being moved by the force that's moving it. A big blob of water moving slowly has a lot less power than a big blob of water flying at 50,000 miles an hour. That's the difference. So force times current equals power, or if you prefer, volts times amps equals watts, and watts is the measure of electrical power. There we go, that's 3 of our 5 terms done already. Let me show you the 4th one, resistance. I squeeze this bottle and it's got a little nozzle on the end. I've actually got a chicken just down there, so I'll just wait for it to get out of the way. Move yourself, Frankie, hold on. Right, so if I squeeze it, a little thin jet comes out. I take the lid off and squeeze again, a lot more water comes out. And the reason that a lot more water comes out is there is less resistance because there's a bigger hole. So it's easier for the same amount of power to move more current. So resistance is how hard it is to shove the stuff around. The 5th term that we need to understand is the type of electricity. There are only really 2 types, AC and DC, alternating current and direct current. Alternating current is what you've got in your house, so the electricity moves backwards and forwards. Direct current is what you get from a battery, and it forms a circuit and returns to the battery. So it moves one way around the circuit. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. Those are the 5 terms we need to understand. So again, just to recap, current, the actual stuff that moves in an electrical circuit, measured in amps. Force, the amount that's pushing on it, how hard we're pushing that current around, measured in volts. Power, the power of the push, how much force we're applying times the amount of current that we're moving. And just as an example, some people struggle with the idea of that. Think of a hose pipe. You turn the tap on full, some water's coming out. Now you connect that same hose pipe to a jet wash and squirt the water out the jet wash. The jet wash is much more powerful. You're not moving more water, no more water's coming out the tap, but you're applying more force to that water using the jet wash. So what you've got is more power, but not more current. Hope that helps. Resistance, how hard it is to move stuff around. And finally, alternating current versus direct current, and all electric fences work on direct current. That's it. That's all we need to know in our Bluffer's Guide to Electrical Terms. Now that we've got to grips with the terminology, let's look at the parts of an electric fence, and we'll go through them one at a time, just explaining what they are and what they do. And after that, we'll take a moment to look at how the electric fence as a whole fits together, how it works, and how it stops predators getting at your livestock. The first major component we need to talk about is the fence itself. There's 2 major kinds of fence. There's what I'll call strand fencing, and there's what I'll call mesh fencing. Strand fencing has 1, 2 or 3, almost like wires, strands, run along fences at varying heights. It's usually used to keep livestock where you want it, so for strip grazing horses, to keep sheep on a certain area of pasture where you want to feed them, to keep cattle where you want them, that type of thing, to keep livestock where it's needed. There's various types of these strands. There's tapes, there's ropes, there's wires, but ultimately it's 1, 2 or 3 strands carrying electric current, keeping larger livestock where it's needed. The other major type is mesh fencing. Mesh fencing again has many variants. There's rabbit mesh, goat mesh, sheep mesh, poultry mesh, but pretty much it serves a dual purpose of keeping the livestock where you want it, but also keeping predators out. And rather than having multiple strands, mesh comes as a single roll that you can put where you need it. Let's bring you in close, let's have a quick look at some mesh, and let me explain the major features of mesh to you. Let's take a quick look at this mesh then. We're going to do an episode all to do with different types of mesh, different heights, different colours, different types of poles. So what we're going to give you today is just a quick overview, enough to understand the theory. So what we have is a mesh. You may notice that it has bigger gaps at the top than it does at the bottom. The reason for that on poultry mesh is smaller chicks, etc., can't then easily pop through the holes at the bottom, and larger creatures that might be trying to get in, a bigger mesh is fine for keeping them out. So there is an arrangement that makes sense and a right way up. Smaller mesh at the bottom, bigger mesh at the top. Talking of the bottom, the very lowest strand of this fence is not electrified. I'll bring you in very close in a minute and I'll show you that, and we'll explain when we go through how we put all the components together why that's vitally important. So, mesh of different sizes, electrified all the way down except the bottom strand. It's supported on specialist poles, and those poles must be insulated. We can't have those poles touching the fence conductively, so we don't want them made of metal, Otherwise they will conduct all the electricity away into the ground, and that stops the fence working. So they have to be insulated from the current that the fence is carrying. So the major components there, the mesh itself and the poles, and as I've said, we'll cover those in detail in a separate video. Let's come in close, examine the mesh and examine that bottom strand and see how it's different. Here's a close-up then of poultry mesh. What I want you to notice is there's green stuff, but can you see where my fingertip is, there is also silver strands. The horizontal lines in the mesh, these things, are made up of a mix of polyurethane for strength, that's the green stuff, and metal to carry the current. So the metal filaments are live, polyurethane is just there to stop them getting snapped as soon as something touches it, because they're very fine. The vertical elements, these, are there to provide rigidity, and they're just polyurethane, they're not live. So if you ever want to test your fence, only test the horizontal elements, not the vertical elements. Let's look at the bottom, at that bit that I told you isn't live. This is the bottom of the fence, as you can see from the presence of grass. Note here that there is a black and yellow strand as opposed to the more normal green or green and silver strands. The black and yellow strand is not electrified, and it's vitally important for the correct functioning of your fence that none of the live strands are touching vegetation or the earth itself. So that strand doesn't matter. These verticals I've told you are not electrified, so they don't matter. These strands with the silver in mustn't be touching vegetation or earth. The last thing I want to show you is how the poles support the mesh. The poles have to be bought in the same height as the mesh, and there are various types and thicknesses and rigidities of poles and different ways to push them into the ground, and we'll cover all that when we do the episode on fencing itself, the detailed fence choices. All I want you to observe for now is at the very top there's a slit cut in the pole that the mesh, or the top strand of the mesh, hooks into to hold the mesh rigidly upright, supported away from the ground, and to ensure that it doesn't sag, so that no element that's live touches the ground and damages the effectiveness of the fence. The next major component of electric fence that I want to talk to you about is how we get the power in, and the component that does that is called an energizer. And what an energizer does is it takes power from a source, either a battery or the mains, and it converts that power to high voltage DC, direct current, so current running one way round the fence. High voltage scares a lot of people when I say it's high. I do mean high voltage. This energizer, well maintained, will put out 10,000 volts. And while that sounds really scary, you know when you get out of a car and it's got a nylon carpet, your feet are rubbed on it, and you get that little static jolt when you get out? Well, a static electric spark is 20,000 volts. This is half the voltage of static, if you want to look at it that way. Electricians used to have a saying that it's volts that jolts, but mills that kills. What that means is volts literally give you that out. Milliamps current is what is dangerous. An electric fence uses high voltage to give you the ow, low current to make it safe. Let me bring you in close. We'll take a look at the energizer. We'll see how they work. We'll go on from there. So this is an energizer. It has an earth and live power out, and this one has a 12 volt power in. What it does is takes that 12 volt, converts it to high voltage, low current, and then pulses that current through the fence. Let me show you how you connect it up. To run your energizer from a 12 volt battery, just put the crocodile clips on the appropriate terminals of the battery, and here is a supplied lead that ends in a plug, and that plug plugs into the side of the energizer, and that's the energizer powered up. This particular energizer can also be powered from the mains. Let me just quickly show you that. This particular energizer is designed to be mains or battery. If you want to run it from the mains, there's a specialist mains transformer. This transformer plugs into the mains and converts 230 volt AC, mains electricity, alternating current, into 12 volt DC, direct current. And then it plugs into the same port on the side of the Energizer. Important to note, if you're going to run your Energizer from mains, the Energizer and the transformer must be kept indoors with long lead out cables to the fence, cables that connect the Energizer to the fence, because you can't be getting mains electricity wet. Your Energizer will come supplied with two output leads. Positive lead that connects to the red screw terminal and from there to the fence, and an earth lead in green that connects to an earth spike. And we'll talk about the earth spike in a minute. The first thing we have to do is unscrew the live terminal and attach the clip for the live lead to that, and from there to the fence. As you can see, we've now attached the end of the live lead to the live pole of the Energizer. What we now need to do is attach the crocodile clip to the fence. Let me show you how to do that. The type of poultry mesh we use has one of these connectors at each end, and you can see it's got a thick bundle of wires coming from it, and those bundle of wires are the ends of all the horizontal strands in the fence. So if you connect your crocodile clip here, you power every single one of the horizontal strands. You can also use those connectors to join up fence sections, to add in gates, and a lot of other aspects we'll look at in the specialist fence episode. If we've attached our positive terminal to the end connector of the mesh, we now need to do something with our earth connection. And what we attach that to is an earth spike, which is a fancy name for a 3 foot long, 1 metre long bit of metal that you need to drive almost its full length into the ground, and then take your earth crocodile clip and attach it to the earth spike. The earth itself, the actual ground, is part of your electric fence circuit, and I'll show you how all that hangs together in the next section of the video. The easiest way to understand the correct functioning of an electric fence is with the aid of a diagram. So let's start building one up. To start with, what we have here is some grass and some earth, and both of those are an important factor in the correct functioning of your fence. Now we've added some poultry mesh, and you can see there's a blue band that I've shown at the bottom, and that's the part of the mesh that can touch the vegetation because it isn't carrying any electricity. All the horizontal strands above that are the ones that will be live and will carry electricity. Now we've added the Energizer. Just as in real life, there's a lead connecting the Energizer to the mesh and another connecting it to the earth spike. The Energizer is sending pulses of high voltage along the horizontal strands, other than the blue shaded strands, of the poultry mesh. And the current wants to come from those strands back through the earth into the earth spike. But there's no connection between the horizontal strands and the earth until a predator comes along. And if that predator touches one of the horizontal strands and the earth at the same time, the pulse of high voltage allows current to throw through the poultry mesh, through the predator, into the ground, along the ground, and back up the earth spike. And that completes the direct current DC circuit that an electric fence operates on. So in its normal state, there's a break in the circuit. The fence does not touch the ground, and both of those are, if you like, wires. And when the predator connects the wire that is the fence to the wire that is the ground, current can flow through the fence, through the predator, through the ground and back to the energizer. Interestingly, if a little bird lands on top of your fence and isn't touching the ground, it won't receive any shock at all because it isn't completing the circuit. In a nutshell, that's how electric fences work. If you've enjoyed today's content, can you spare 5 seconds? Give us a thumbs up down below. If you're feeling really generous, either leave us a comment or even better, promote the video on social media, on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all those other great places. It really helps us out when people do that. We're so grateful. Future episodes of this series are going to include one on all things power, different types of energizers, different types of power sources, all those types of things. The second one will be on different types of fence, different types of poles, gates, all things fence related. And there'll be another on design, installation, planning, fault finding, all those other little topics that fit around electric fences. If you want to know about those when we publish them, hit the subscribe button down below and the bell icon next to it and you'll be notified every time we post a video. But whatever you do, come back and see us soon. Take care.